the underpinnings of the platform is what really helped. It helped Comcast save millions in operational cost. The system provided the ability to quickly identify issues that are long running, as well as new issues that popped up. And that really helped to reduce that overall failure rate to under 1%.
Portworx with Pure has allowed us to reduce that, so that's 1 monthly upgrade on a single instance of the database and the application versus 50 previously. So that was typically about 400 man hours a month to do that upgrade, is now down to 4 hours a month. And it's starting to shrink because we're able to do it even faster.
We started Kubernetes, I think we started in our cloud native journey or transformation way back in 2017. Our Kubernetes journey was always tethered around stateful stuff. State has been an important part. Storage is the key integral part, and I think there's hardly anything we can do in Kubernetes without having storage, and that is what is brought us together. Still a lot of problems to solve, and hoping to actually make it simpler and easier for everybody going forward.
Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, based on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar on why platform engineering is the future. We have a very special guest with us, James Webb. We're going to talk about a ton of things here, including learning from his experience. I'll let him introduce himself. But we're also going to touch upon some of the game-changing benefits that platform engineering brings to modern app development. James, welcome to this webinar. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, my name is James Webb. I've been with Portworx and Pure Storage now for about 6 months. I came from T-Mobile, where I help lead the platform engineering practice and the container platform practice for the enterprise IT organization. I have a broad background in data centers, on-prem technology, compute, storage. Have been doing it for about 25 years and dove into the container world about 8 years ago, starting with Cloud Foundry and then moving on to Kubernetes.
Awesome, awesome. As most of you would have guessed, James is an early adopter of Kubernetes, has obviously run this at a massive scale. So, get started, wear your seatbelts. We'll learn all about it shortly. So just some logistical things here, folks. If you have a question, please use the chat box. We will try to answer it live. And also make sure that you're addressing any expertise that you're trying to gain out of this conversation. So this talk will start with going right into it. James, before we talk about what you did at T-Mobile, why you picked Portworx, can you tell us about what is platform engineering from your perspective, right, for folks who are new to it?
Yeah, so platform engineering is a slightly different practice than how infrastructure teams and just any other teams provided services to customers within large IT enterprises. The old model used to be a very transactional model, right? You open a ticket, you get a server. You open a different ticket, you get some storage. You open a different ticket, you maybe have a config change. That evolved into like the DevOps movement, which was more you give all the operational teams the freedom to kind of do their own thing and manage their own infrastructure, manage their own how they deploy things, how they fulfill their own requirements to deploy their applications. And a lot of that came around when teams started going to the public cloud, right? That was a way to really build some velocity and allow teams to move quickly. I think what organizations found was that that put a lot of burden on those development teams and those application teams, where they were having to do a lot of the heavy lifting to manage their own infrastructure, manage all the components that made up their application stack, and that took the focus away from them being able to focus on development and delivering an application to doing a lot of infrastructure activity. So this is kind of where platform engineering came in. Is how do we enable those developers and those application teams to maximize their productivity and what they're good at and what they should be working on, which is developing applications and deploying them to production, and maintain a much more standard way to a much horizontal underneath them that is an opinionated way for them to deploy their applications.
Makes
Um,
sense. And what are some of the principles here and outcomes that platform engineering teams drive? And what are they
so
always like building towards?
what you're building towards is you want to build an experience that is somewhat uh, uh, transparent for your customers, right? For your internal customers. We at T-Mobile before, we always talked about big C and little c, which was big C was the customers on phones and little c were internal customers. You want to provide an environment that's frictionless for them, at least as frictionless as possible, right? When they need infrastructure, when they need to deploy an application, they should be able to engage the platform team and just get access to the resources they need without a lot of fuss, right? So they should be able to onboard, uh, get some sort of set of resources pre-allocated to them in the opinionated way that the platform team's trying to deliver them, and then just use larger mechanism like pipelines, CDCI pipelines to deploy their application and manage their application all the way from dev to production.
Makes sense. Oh, thank you. This is super awesome. And I know you've built a playbook for folks who are doing platform engineering, whether they're at the start of the journey or end of the journey. Could you transition to talk about, okay, what does this platform engineering journey look like, in all stages?
Yeah. So, platform, like one of the things that that we found, and that talking with a lot of our peers at other companies, is that platform engineering, like there's a set of stages that everyone goes through, right? Because you just
Mm,
can't jump in and immediately have everything automated and everything working, and
yeah.
you have to start from the ground up. And what
Mm,
we found is, like, usually, and this is the kind of the journey we went through with our Cloud Foundry environment, and
mhm,
our Cloud Foundry environment actually kind of let us jumpstart our Kubernetes environment. But I'll talk about that in a second. We did most things manually to start with, right? So that
mm,
let us really understand the platforms we were working with, how they functioned, where the possibilities for optimizing through automation were, and we started to slowly build up a arsenal of scripts and processes and pipelines to deploy our platform, and not just to deploy the platform, but also to provide an easy way for customers to onboard onto that platform.
mm,
Once we understood that very well, that took us to the next level, right? Which was foundational automation, right? So now
mm,
we knew at a high level what the platform required, right, from beginning to end for deployment, and what the customer journey on that platform looked like from beginning to end. So then we could start focusing on really enhancing the automation, and sometimes we had to go out and find new tools, but you know we were able to build a platform that was really self-service for the customer. That was sort of the goal, right? Was that we wanted to be involved as little as possible, right? Because the only way that our small team could scale to support thousands of developers was
mm,
not to be transactional, where they would open a ticket and we would take some sort of action. We
yeah.
wanted to build a large a platform that the application teams could interact with a certain set of guardrails already built around it, and then do what they need to do, and only reach out to us really when something was out of bounds, right? So really wanted to minimize the interaction between our team and our customers, not because we wanted to stay away from them, but we wanted them to be able to service what their own needs.
Yeah.
Then that goes into the third phase, right? Is like, once you've got that feedback loop, and once you've got customers on the platform, and you're really starting to understand what their requirements are and what your requirements are, you can move to the next stage where you really start automating everything, and you start to focus on uh, automating sort of the boundary cases, right? The edge cases where when things go down or when things go wrong, right? How do you create like a self-healing platform? How do you alarm and detect when something's wrong? And then how do you start optimizing the resource utilization? Because what we found is that we didn't quite get that right in phase 2, but in phase 3, we had the discipline and the data to start showing, okay, here's where we're being wasteful, here's where we're not. And then we could take that data back to our customers, and then with their help, right, we could really, streamline and get even more value out of the platform. And then finally, the end goal, which I don't think really anybody gets to, is the full lifecycle automation, right? That's more like a nirvana state, right? That you're trying to get to, but you probably almost never reach. And what we found is that you kind of land somewhere between stage 3 and stage 4, right? We call like 3.1, 3.2, to where you really have things automated. Your platform is running smooth. You have a feedback loop going with your customers, and you're adding new functionality as needed, but you're never really getting to the stage where you can just sit back and watch everything run, right? You're always having to put
Is
some
that
effort
because
into
the
it.
ecosystem just keeps coming up with new and new capabilities? All vendors have new offerings.
It's technology, right? Yeah, 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 exactly. That's one of the beauties of the platform engineering, right? Is once you have sort of uh, the engine in place, tweaking it for new requirements or as new technologies come in, usually is a lot faster than it would be otherwise, right? You can adopt new technologies much faster because you've already got a practice and a system, right, that you can integrate that into versus having to build it from scratch every time.
Mhm. Fantastic. Oh, this is awesome. And for all of those folks who are in platform engineering, building or maintaining or scaling your developer platforms, as used to call them small Cs, but there were thousands of small Cs, these developers who were being served on that platform. Hopefully, this is a good playbook for you to use, right? Feel free to ask any questions around that. This is super helpful, James. Let's move on to talk about, okay, now that you have this platform and you built this, if you step back, like, what was the end benefit that your developers got from your
So
entire best practice? And then also, like, could you zoom a little bit on, like, okay, why did you guys pick Portworx? Why did this cloud native storage come into play?
Absolutely. So we are, again, back to our initial deployment was on Cloud Foundry, right? We were a very large Cloud Foundry, and Cloud Foundry is really a stateless provider. There were some services that actually came with our platform that provided some state, but that was external to the containers. So the idea there is how do we let developers focus on what they need to on our development teams and our application teams really focus on what they should be focusing on, right? Which is their applications. So the way that we had great executive sponsorship, that's key for almost any platform engineering effort. But the way we thought we would focus on helping them is that to remove the toil it took and to standardize how they landed in development to how they landed in production, and give them the ability to deploy at any time and to self-manage their deployments through the ecosystem. And the container platform ecosystem is kind of custom built. It's kind of custom built for that, right? Because you can introduce canary workloads. There's a lot of different approaches to deploying workloads into production when you're containerized, and you can do it in your legacy environments as well. But it's a lot more difficult, right? The container platforms are really tuned for that journey. But anyways, our base idea was we wanted to reduce the cycle time it took to take basically a line of code into production. And what we found was in our old ecosystem, it took 6 months and 72 steps. So I think what we found, right, it is the kind of the most standard path to get a line of code into production. When we moved teams to Cloud Foundry, what we found is we could actually have teams much more rapidly because they broke things down to microservices. Changes were much more isolated from each other, and the environments were much more consistent from development to production, that teams could put a code change in, test it adequately, and then push it to production using the environment. And if, get very quick feedback on whether or not that change was working, roll it back if it wasn't, and keep it in if it was. So that was, that was the
Mm,
basis for the journey. Now, what came next, right, is what we found is that we were having a lot of customers were asking to have more state with their applications, right? Instead of relying on external systems to contain all their state, they wanted to build it into their application and keep
mhm.
control of it. Well, Cloud Foundry didn't really have a good mechanism for that, and Kubernetes was the emerging winner in the container orchestration space, and
Right.
we knew Kubernetes had storage capabilities. So we started undertaking that journey, and very early on, when we were building out the layers of the platform, we knew we needed to have a storage component, and we looked at a couple different options, right? We were already large Pure customers, so we looked at the Pure PSO at the time, which was basically a precursor to the CSI, to the CSI functionality you see today in Kubernetes, where it would actually, reach out to the pure array, and then by iSCSI actually, present volumes directly to the worker nodes that act as PVs. We
Mm,
looked at the VMware CSI that didn't meet our requirement for, and it wasn't CSI at the time, but that didn't really meet our requirements for everything. And then we looked at Portworx, and
mm,
Portworx sort of fit the bill for what we were looking for, right? Which was, it built an abstraction layer
mm,
in our, abstraction layer for storage in our Kubernetes environment, very akin to, the ingress layer, or very akin to the CNI layer, right? It just kind of became a
mhm,
very easy button for us to provide storage to customers, and still, again, put some guardrails around it to use the functionality, the replica functionality to provide protection, so that as worker nodes went down, or as application teams restarted their workloads, and it would move from node to node, or as we were doing maintenance in the background, right, where we have to upgrade a cluster, and it repaves and basically rebuilds every node.
mhm.
We found that Portworx gave us a much more stable, scalable, reliable environment, right? So it became the default standard for how we deployed the platform. And as we grew from, tens of nodes to thousands of nodes, it stayed as the storage substrate.
That totally makes sense. And obviously for folks, this is a folks who are, dabbling with Kubernetes today, this is a time when, Portworx was not even acquired by Pure. So we go way back, James. Thanks for your partnership and also all the guidance you've provided along the years to make Portworx what it is today, in your role at T-Mobile, including continuing to helping it scale by now being directly in the engineering team. This is super helpful. Thanks for these nuggets. We will talk again with you, maybe with some other customers together in a future webinar. But I will say, for folks who want to continue to engage with us, please come and get a meeting out with a solution architect. We'll be happy to even schedule a meeting with James if you want to, work directly with him to get some of his expertise, if you're dealing with a platform engineering problem or an architectural issue. And also, obviously, we're always here if you have a cloud native storage issue. We have a ton of experience helping customers, running Kubernetes storage at scale, including the scale that James talked about. We also have another important hands-on lab that we host every month. There's one around the corner. There's also one in March. Feel free to use the QR code and register for it. James, I would really like to thank you again for joining us today and
Yep.
sharing your wisdom, your playbook, and best practices with everyone.
Yep. And can't say enough about the hands-on labs. They're a fantastic way to get introduced to not just the product, but to the ecosystem if you're not familiar.
Hey, you heard it from the horse's mouth. Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being with us. Have a good one.